Good afternoon. My name is Bartek Czyczerski. I'm CEO of Business Science Poland. So your co-host with other partners of yourself for this afternoon, for the whole day actually. Now we're approaching one of the last attractions for you for today. Really fantastic panel that will be talking about strategic value chains. Until very recently, I think we all thought about strategic value chains only in the context of economic security, but now, as we speak, the geopolitical reality is developing that way that it's not only about strategic values are not just about economic security, they are about any sort of security from energy to economic, military, and so on. And we'll discuss that, whether actually Europe has whatever and anything it takes to secure that we are on the safe side of this equation of strategic value chains. Your host will be Rolf, Kuby, and he will moderate the panel and will guide us through the discussion. But before this happens, I'm pleased to invite Jacek Truszczyński from DG Grow to give us a keynote. Jacek is responsible at DG Grow for net zero industry and will walk us through what has been done so far and what will be done in terms of resilience on strategic value chains. So Jacek, over to you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. So indeed, I will talk about resilience of supply chains, what has been done so far, and I will try to present to you what is likely to happen soon. And basically, I think, resilience of supply chains to have this discussion here right now is very timely, because this is really front and center of policy making in the EU, in many national capitals as well. And we all know where it comes from. It's, our focus on supply chain started with COVID and the disruptions this created. But I think the groundbreaking, let's say, the turning point was 2022. Of course, there was the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where we saw the impact on the resilience of our energy supply. Another element that happened in 2022 was the agreement of the Inflation Reduction Act in the States. This was the massive subsidy program to support the production of things like solar, batteries, wind, things that have been considered clearly since then as strategic assets. And Europe at the time concluded that we cannot. There's a world race to secure these supply chains, and we cannot be left behind. A third interesting thing happened in 2022, less visible. It was a ruling of the European Court of Justice in a case opposing us, the European Commission, and Lenovo. And the case was as follows. We had a financing program, a joint undertaking to develop a European supercomputer. One of the award criteria was European added value. A preference for local preference. And Lenovo took us to court saying that this is not in line with WTO, not in line with EU rules, that this is discriminatory. And the ECJ ruled that EU taxpayers' money can be used to support domestic supply chains. So that was an interesting case on which I think we build currently. And of course, we know that the world is going increasingly towards protectionism. But what I would like to underline that so far Europe has tried to have a more open approach in this protectionism. And this is for a good reason, because if you compare the share of GDP of Europe that comes from exports, it's twice the size of the US. So we have an interest, of course, to safeguard some international rules. And when I say that we tried to have a more open approach to protectionism, this is the concept of resilience that we are applying currently, notably under the Net Zero Industry Act that my team is in charge of. And what resilience means? Resilience in this case means diversification. So, if we have a high dependency for the supply of solar or batteries, public authorities in member states as of January next year will have to give extra points to companies from other countries than China, because of course it's China, or they can exclude companies, supplies coming from China. So this is really groundbreaking, and So far, we had this under the Net Zero Industry Act, but there's also legislation on heavy-duty vehicles, where for electric buses, public authorities will also have to apply resilience criteria, meaning diversification. So this is one thing we did. Another thing we did was to be more assertive in ensuring a level playing field. For too long, EU companies had worse conditions in third country markets than companies from those markets in the EU. And so we have adopted two key pieces of legislation, the foreign subsidies regulation and the international procurement instrument. And under those frameworks, already the Commission has initiated several investigations, notably into the wind sector, to check whether bidders from China, again, do not benefit from subsidies, therefore putting our companies at a disadvantage. And finally, what we did, third element, is to increasingly apply, as in the case of this joint undertaking for the supercomputer, local preference requirements in things like the Innovation Fund, where we try to finance the development of a domestic battery supply chain, hydrogen, where we give extra points to companies coming from the EU. So that's where we are today. What comes next, I think, is clear that we are moving increasingly towards more protectionism. There's clear now a political direction to go towards Buy European. The Commission announced that this will be proposed as of, at the end of this year or early next year as part of the review of the public procurement legislation. And actually under the Critical Medicines Act, which was recently proposed, for the first time, the Commission proposed that actually you should give preference, member states, to local production, not only diversification. So we will be going increasingly in that direction. Also, of course, because of the defense dimension, my Commissioner Séjourné yesterday was speaking in the Parliament, and he spoke a lot about defense linked to the industrial supply chains. He said that you cannot have EU tanks without EU steel, you cannot have EU ammunition without EU chemicals, and so on. So clearly, in that context, there will be more push towards resilient supply chains. And just to conclude, a few words of conclusion from the work we did so far under the Net Zero Industry Act, what we have to be mindful in this implementation of this new agenda. First of all, supply chains are really complex. Companies source components from many different countries, and so we have to leave some flexibility to companies not to source everything just locally. Second, we have to balance these different objectives. Of course, if you put too much emphasis on solar PV being made just in the EU, that will have a cost. So you have to have some safeguards. In the case of the Net Zero Industry Act, member states do not have to apply those rules if applying them would lead to a 20% increase or more of the equipment they purchase. And thirdly, we will not succeed in having this new industrial push just by having a defensive agenda. And of course, we need also other things that help those companies develop in the EU. So things like fast permitting, support to innovation, financing, where for the moment we have a clear gap. But as you have seen, probably the Commission will propose a competitiveness fund. But until this comes into play, there will be a few years. So we have to see what we can do in the meantime. So I will conclude here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacek, for setting the scene and highlighting all the aspects that we want to discuss. Thank you for joining us here today. Please do develop some questions, ideas that you want to share with the panel, that you want to raise here today, because after we will have a round of initial questions to the panelists before I will introduce them to you. But at the end, I want to have a very lively and discussion with you, the audience. So first, I will introduce all of the panelists, and then I will start with the questions. So Andrzej Szydło is the CEO of KGHM since 2024, with more than 25 years of working experience in leading positions in KGHM, and also 3 years, 21 to 23, as board member of Hyundai Engineering in Poland. Dorota. Pawlak is president of Ensemble 3 or Ensemble 3, Center of Excellence for Nanophotonics, Advanced Materials, and Novel Crystal Growth-Based Technologies. Thank you for joining us. Stephane Mespoulet is at ESA, head of Structures Mechanical Materials Divisions, and before working for Arianespace in Astrium, so he has been building up rockets for the moon. Thank you for joining too. Jacek Truszczyński is Deputy Head of Unit Net Zero Industries, DG GROW European Commission, has been introduced by Bartek earlier. And last but not least, Olga Malinkiewicz, co-founder and CTO of Saule Technologies, a leading company in advanced perovskite solar cell technologies. So something I will have to learn how to spell that and how to explain how photovoltaics work. So thank you to all of you for being here. As I explained earlier, I want short answers to my questions, and then I want a lively debate. And at each and every moment, please intervene if you want to disagree with a colleague on the panel or you want to have a second statement as well. So I will start with KGHM, one of the partners of this fabulous event here from BSP. So thank you for having us here at a very important moment just ahead of the summit. So KGHM is a multi-metallic company supplying strategic and essential raw materials from mining to recycling. What are the key challenges to ensuring that the entire supply chain remains resilient in the face of geopolitical and economic pressures? Andrzej, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll try to be short because there are so many distinguished guests here. So, on this occasion, I was here 6 months ago on the panel related to clean industrial deal, and it was quite satisfying that at that time already, some people in the European Commission recognized that the only direction to move towards green energy and clean industry has to be recognized wider, a bit wider, paying attention at the industry also, not to force it to simply move away from Europe. But on this occasion, I would like to introduce KGHM because, Rolf, you introduced me. But to understand better, because everything starts from the underground. Everything starts underground. Any kind of activity and development, even very ambitious one, needs minerals, metals, simply resources. And 100 years ago, even more, mining started actually in Europe. So the expertise, okay, now it's widespread. But everything actually started in Europe. So we can say that the experience is still here. Not necessarily on other continents, but to a certain extent, we are now overtaken. I went through a document which is called Critical Raw Material Act. I fully agree with the whole document. Maybe a quarter ago, I told Bartek Truszczyński that I'm not very satisfied because it's not very ambitious. Because it says that there are limitations that Europe can be dependent on external supply. And currently, in current world, the situation is completely different from the situation that we were accustomed to 6 months ago, 1 year ago. I don't remember the name of the guy, but someone some time ago said, "Drill, baby, drill." That's not that stupid, not that stupid. Because we have to remember that To a certain extent, we can accept the situation that some of raw materials, we don't fulfill our needs 100%. But we cannot allow the situation that we are dependent 100%. So, and mining business is very specific. It's a long-term investment. From the first euro that you put into mining to the first metal, whatever it is, copper, nickel, steel, lead, platinum, it's more than 15 years. So, okay, we have some mining business located in Europe, including KGHM. To start a new business based on the resources located in Europe, to be less dependent on the resources from the outside, we have to remember the decision that we take today will give fruits for 15 up to 20 years. Okay, KGHM. Europe needs something like 3.7 million tons of copper, for example, per year. And of course, it will be more. It will double long term. Short term, I mean several years, it will be more than 4 million. And I would like to concentrate on primary copper, which is mined copper. Europe can produce something like 1.1 million here from our own resources. And it's even a bit less because included is Serbian mine, which is 66, if I remember rightly, owned by Chinese, and 50% of the copper mined in Serbia goes away to China. Something like 100,000 tons goes away to China. But this is only example, only copper. KGHM is responsible for primary copper production in Europe at the level of 400,000 tons per year. Of course, we have to remember that it is not only primary copper. There is recycling, but the recycling times will be longer and longer. So it is a closed circle, which will a bit, depending how we understand that, shrink or grow. But it will be at a certain level and not increase. KGHM, and this is the question, how we survived, because the company is more than 60 years old, and we have one of the deepest mines worldwide. For sure, the deepest in Europe, and very difficult, so quite expensive. It's not an open pit. We have some assets in Chile, in Canada, in the United States, but these are responsible for something like 20% of our output. Going to the conclusion, in my opinion, we have to be very, very careful, because so far what we expected from the outside was consecutive expectations to improve, to decrease the influence on the environment, to transform to green energy, to comply with all the regulations, and parallelly to that, we go deeper and deeper and deeper. So, naturally, there is some extreme where I cannot imagine, but one could, it is not more profitable to have this business in Europe. And this is a challenge, because today, during lunch, there was a lot of discussion about different aspects. But everything starts from raw materials. So I think we should be very careful here and hope to maybe answer your questions and hope that we go deeper into that.
Andrzej, thanks for highlighting the importance of raw materials and that we have assets in Europe, like your company KGHM, which is for the audience also one of the 2 biggest silver deposit known in the world. So we do have potential in mining in Europe. I come to you, Dorota, because you can maybe go more into depth on this strategic importance of raw materials, because I know that's your background. Why is securing crystalline materials and raw materials strategically important for Europe's technological sovereignty?
Thank you. So I would like to start from this, that we are just behind KGHM in the supply chain, maybe in a little bit different field, because so we are a company, we are a research center, but also a company, and we make materials, crystals, like 3-5 compound semiconductors, oxide crystals, and also composite. So to make these materials, of course, we need the raw materials. So in the supply chain, first are the raw materials, then in the semiconductor or photonics industry, then there are the crystals from which make substrates, then somebody makes devices on it, and then all these devices are put into different kinds of instrumentation or different kinds of applications. And to answer the question of Rolf, or the first part of it, I would like a little bit help of the audience. So I would like to ask, who from you have now with you a mobile phone, a laptop, a tablet, or a wearable electronics, or anything like that? So please raise your hands. Okay, so if you have all these things with you, it means you have a piece of crystal inside. So this is a very short answer to the question why it's so important. Without the crystals, the modern world would not exist. And to make the crystals, we need the raw materials. And I would like to come to one point in history, because there is a lot of Polish people here. Sorry for the other people. And so actually in 40s, in 1947, there was developed first transistor in the Bell laboratories in United States, and 3 scientists got a Nobel Prize for that. But they couldn't do it if there would be not a method to grow a crystal. And so they used a germanium crystal, which was grown by the Czochralski method. Czochralski was a Polish scientist. Actually, he was born in Poland, in Kcynia, but was a Polish-German scientist, and he developed this so-called now Czochralski method, which is the most worldwide used method to grow crystals, like silicon, gallium arsenide, indium phosphide, all kinds of crystals, which you use for all kinds of semiconductor industry, are grown with this method. And so, as I mentioned, to grow these crystals, we need, so there are actually 2 problems. There are 2 problems in this question, and there are 2 problems in Europe. So not only that we don't have enough raw materials, but also we lost practically the technology to make these crystals. So in Europe, there is maybe one company like Freiberger who make gallium arsenide crystals, but well, they start to go into indium phosphide, but indium phosphide, gallium antimonide, gallium phosphide, actually we have the know-how, and there is no practically industry. And all these kind of materials are bought by photonics industry in Europe from Russia, China, and US. And of course, we have the situation that nobody can buy, or nobody buys from Russia. US restricted the strategic materials with the first presidency of President Trump. And of course, now China is the big problem because they made big restrictions on these kind of materials like gallium, germanium, indium, antimony. And they produce 95% of gallium, 90% of germanium, and around 50% of indium and antimony. So this is the trade war between China and US, but we suffer, and without this, we cannot go further.
Thanks a lot, and I think the example of gallium is quite striking to see that we need it for all of the application, and we are 100% dependent on China. But I hear from the mining world that there are chances to process and to have gallium made in Europe as well. So I come from the resource questions to the space. So Stephane, what supply risk does ESA identify, and what are the envisaged solutions?
So yes, as you say, we are now at the end of the value chain. So I represent the European Space Agency because maybe not everybody knows what ESA is, so European Space Agency. We are basically managing programs like Galileo and Copernicus for the account of the European Commission, who is financing these programs. So we are building the satellites and launching them. From our perspective, I say we've got several risks. I mean, for supply chains, we've got plenty of risks. There are some risks which we can manage by ourselves and risk we cannot manage by ourselves. The space domain is quite small. It's about 15 billion euros in revenue in Europe. If you compare this to the aeronautics domain, it's 300 billion euros. So you see a factor of difference. I don't speak about the automotive domain, but basically we don't have the volumes to have a sustainable supply chain. So this is one of the main main challenges. But for the challenges we can manage ourselves, we have, for example, the technology challenge. If we want to go for a deep space mission, we need to develop new materials. For that, we need to invest heavily in innovation, in R&D, and we do that on a daily basis. Our budget for R&D is very, very high compared to any industry, and this is to manage these challenges we have technologically, and we factor that in the developments of our satellites and our launchers. It takes time, but this is because we need to mature the technologies. So these are the things that we can do on our own. Now, the things we can't do on our own, because we don't have the volume, are the obsolescence risks, for example. We are talking a lot about PFAS at the moment. It's a big, big risk for space because there are plenty of things we can't do without the PFAS. So before we put the ban on the PFAS, we really need to think about what the impacts will be. We cannot do our missions. So space is said to be strategic, so we really need to think about that. So obsolescence. We need to have other application domains with us, and we've got some success stories on that. For example, the aluminium surface treatments, Allodyne was banned due to the REACH regulation, and we found an alternative, and we put this in our product. The biggest risk today, and as was said by the keynote speaker, is geodependency. So you call it resilience of the supply chain, geodependency. In our space programs, we've got a requirement to buy European technology. So for institutional space programs, the primes need to put European technology on board. Now, you can do that only if you've got an industry in Europe. And this is where it becomes a bit tricky for specific technologies. If I go to the materials, we don't go that deep. So basically, we ask the primes to put components, equipment, sub-assemblies which are made in Europe. We don't ask them to look at the material. And we should. So this is, I think, a move we need to do, especially if we are to get closer to the defense industry. I think because there we will have volume, and I think we should put these regulations in place, these requirements, when we build a system to really go down to the material level and to enforce, because it's strategic to enforce buying European, and then you get away from the profitability issues that you quoted earlier. So I think this is the main challenge for us, geo-dependency.
Stephane, maybe to answer a bit the question of the profitability, I think we need to secure ESG and due diligence compliant investment. So if we secure the good that we do in many of our activities, yes, then we are already ahead. And that leads me to you again, Jacek, a question on a proper industry policy needs the means to achieve its goals. And you hinted to Draghi, innovation, subsidies as being the key enablers of reaching the competitiveness back again. Does Europe, the European Commission, have the means to act on this, or do we have too many conflicting goals, as hinted by Stephane on PFAS, or on different objectives that we have today?
I mean, in terms of conflicting goals, I mean, there's a tension, of course, between, to some extent, securing quickly supply chains and environmental protection. We heard it, you know, there are very extensive environmental protection rules in the EU for a good reason, but, you know, if you want to have a mine faster than in 20 years, someone has to give. So I think we're going in the direction of security at the expense, to some extent, of environmental protection. Regarding financing, I mean, the problem that we have in the EU, of course, is that we are locked into these 7-year budget cycles with money earmarked upfront to specific objectives. And so, you know, 5 years ago, we didn't know that we will have COVID, we didn't know that there will be an invasion of Ukraine, and so on. And of course, we then reshuffled money around, but that was complex, and now, you know, it's 2025 and the budget is pretty much empty. So how do we support the current policy objectives is the question. But what we did, so first of all, we put pressure on the EIB to change their lending policy. So far, the EIB was not doing defense, they were not doing mining. This is changing. We have also redirected existing money to our objectives. So, for example, on the structural funds, this is hundreds of billions of euros. We allowed member states to finance under better, more favorable conditions, things like, you know, the production of solar PV in the EU. And let's see whether member states will use that opportunity. And finally, there's member state money. So, for example, under the emission trading schemes, member states have revenues from the selling of the allowances. And again, we talk about hundreds of billions of euros. In Poland, so far, a lot of this money was spent on objectives completely unrelated to the green transition or the industrial transition. And now member states will have to make sure that, you know, there's coherence there. So there is money around. We just have to look for it and use it in the right way.
We need to find the right business case, and therefore we need to set the right framework conditions. And that's also the case for the solar industry and also the PV production. Olga, what supply risks have you identified in the PV sector, and what are the envisaged solutions?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not working in traditional photovoltaics. So I'm right now almost 10 years involved in developing and commercialization of new type of photovoltaic solar panels. And what is important, and also was said, that if we want to have photovoltaic, European photovoltaic, we should use photovoltaic European materials like chemistry and others. And the technology I'm working with is like 100% China-free. All the materials can be synthesized locally and can be done in Europe. So from my side, like I do not have, for securing the supply chain, we are like free. We are not, we are using crystals that are done by chemical synthesis. So we are doing basically the ink, and we are printing those crystals on the foils. This is the panel. And our, I would say, problem is not supply chain, but maybe the scale. Because Europe is really good in making inventions and then developing those inventions into industrial phase, but then nothing, like all the production is in China or somewhere else. And if we would like to have solar technology that we can compete with China, and I agree that this is an important decision to make because it's not going to happen next month. We will not see the result next month, but in many years, we have to make today the decision that we invest in the innovation and the PV sector. Photovoltaic cannot replace, of course, all the sources of energy. There are some cases, but if I think some investment are needed and some risk taken is needed if we would like to have our own technology also for us and for export. This have to happen. Interesting fact that this technology was developed and invented in Europe and simultaneously in Japan. So all the patents, all the intellectual property is here. 10 years ago, right? From 4 years from now, I'm trying to ask to build like a big scale factory, right? 4 years ago, we were ready. In the meantime, when we are looking for funds, because it's risky, because it's innovation, because there's a lot of questions, because we have, like in Europe, we haven't done it before, while I'm walking from one door to another door, because yes, the amount of investment is high. But the question is it really high for Europe, like 100 million euros? Maybe it's not. But in the meantime, last 2 years, China invested billions of euros in this technology, and they already built a factory of the perovskite solar cells, right? In 2 years, it took. So if we would like to have, if we don't want to repeat the mistake that we made with the silicon photovoltaics, we have another technology that we can use. But we really have to have production capacity here.
Thank you, Olga. And you should have made your pledge just an hour ago with Dieter Jürgensen here from DG Energy, who simply said that we have to accept that photovoltaics comes from China, and they are largely subsidized over there. And you are making a pledge.
It's not it's not the position of the whole European Commission.
Yeah. No, but I think I'm quoting her.
We have an objective to have 30 gigawatts of local production by 2030.
I'm simply just, and it's good that you are there because I understand there are a lot of investors here, also at this conference. So if you make a good pitch for your business plan, then you might find investors here as well. One concrete question. You are relying on raw materials from where? Is gallium or something in your? Or?
No, that's a completely new type of the semiconductor. It's not the semiconductor that we are using. You don't have this type of crystals right now in your electronic devices. This is a perovskite crystal. It's a perovskite structure. There are some methylammonium salts and so on. This is something that we really do not have to rely on others. We can do it ourselves. We can do it. And I hopefully, finally, we will.
I understand Jacek will help you, and you will find the money from the EIB that is pushing to get all of this off the ground. I will open now the floor quickly for a spontaneous question to the first round, and then I will jump into the second round. Is there a first reaction to what we've been discussing up to now? Bartek.
I don't want to abuse.
Again.
But it is fascinating, and especially to a question to Olga, which is a great response actually to many of our problems, innovation. And this is something we started our discussions today, and it's another example that actually we have what it takes, apparently. at least in the mindset. But my question to Olga is, if you were to name one or maybe two obstacles that actually stop us from doing what China has done. So basically investing in the real world. But money is out there.
Yes.
Money is out there. There's plenty of money. So what's going on? Why the money is not going to the right place? So sorry, this is just one question to you, but the question is maybe to others is because we are talking about, especially Jacek mentioned that actually there is a change of paradigm in terms of looking at the protection or protectionism in the EU. There's more openness to protect domestic industries, clean tech, value chains. This is what we are discussing today. But my question, but of course it goes with the risk because others might want to do the same. And my question is, I don't know to whom exactly, but those that are probably up the value chain, if you were to name one, two of examples of such risks that basically that someone can cut us off, you know, from one day to another, then your business is actually down. So these are my two questions. Thank you.
Please come in, Andrzej, if you want.
Actually, maybe I'll try to answer that differently. Because there is nothing I can imagine day-to-day basis or week-to-week. Of course, I can imagine that suddenly some kind of regulation stops mining activity all around Europe. But no one, I believe, is so stupid to introduce something like this. I do hope. I would go back to what I said before. Due to the fact that we need more mining in Europe, and we should stop talking about the influence on the environment, because when the influence on the environment is reduced to extremes due to any kind of activity, industrial activity, Europe is one of the best or the best. It is undisputed. And environment protection has no borders. So if someone does it elsewhere, probability that it will be done worse than here is pretty high. Conclusion. We should start some new projects. Even Rolf, in the document we discussed many times, your manifest until 2030, yes? You are telling us that 20-30 new mining projects should be started in Europe. But how can we start these projects without being 100% convinced that suddenly, for 5 years, so it's 40% under construction, because we construct a mine for 15, 20 years, with all the permits, 20 years. Any kind of regulation influencing future cost will be introduced. And already now we are on the very subtle balance between the cost and this business is not very profitable. So stability of regulation and some kind of assurance that certain things will not be introduced even in distant future. This is a precondition to save European mining smelting. And one more thing. Recently we observed on the, I go back to copper, forgive me. It's not that easy to buy copper concentrates. Why? We were talking about China. This is Chinese free. Chinese are buying almost every ton of concentrate, copper concentrate, which is possible to buy. 20 years ago, KGHM sold copper cathodes to China because China did not have smelting capacities. Now, most of smelting capacities are located in China, so they need concentrates. In this way, companies like Euromines which is a huge producer of copper in Europe, is in very difficult situation because they have smelters which are based only on imported concentrates. And the treatment and TCRC treatment and refining charges are, let's say, close to zero, even negative, because Chinese are buying. So that tells everything. Actually, two things. First, stability of law, even future assurance. And second, the degree of, we have to cover our needs internally in Europe as much as possible, because it is not only a question of war in Ukraine, but it's also trade war, which is approaching probably. Maybe this is the most important, stability of law and future business environment. I don't know, Bartek, if this is...
Stephane, come in, please.
Maybe to complement and to answer the question, I think what you say is that we need a strategy. And sometimes a strategy goes against the principles of free market that the EC has advocated for years and years. So maybe we also need to change a bit the mindset. If security is so important, if autonomy of Europe is so important, we also need to have a strategy and to build stronger players, even if they sell products which are more expensive. So we need to support them. So this is a strategy. And to come back to your question, I think what makes it difficult to go from innovation to production, I think in Europe and in the space industry especially, space domain, we've got a lot of innovations. I can give tens of examples. For example, we can make carbon fiber composite made out of waste, okay? Not using petrol, out of waste. And we could do that in Europe. And we would not depend on Japan, the US to make our carbon fiber structures, which you know are 90% of our satellites. The innovation has been made, but we haven't scaled it up. And for that, you need a strategy, you need a vision, and you need also to convince the persons who are going to give the money to have a kind of market. And this is why we need cross-collaboration, across space, defense, maybe aeronautics. It depends then, of course, on the material we are speaking about. But we need to increase the market and to have a strategy. I think this is the main thing.
Olga, please.
Yes, I can agree from the perspective of a person who would like to upscale technology. All right, this is a very important point, also addressing the question, that it's very difficult to convince someone to invest a lot of money in the new technology for the upscaling. The private sector, this investment is very risky and also long-term profit. Like the revenue case is going to come within the years. This is strategic. It has to come with some subsidies or European Union or government subsidies, and it's very difficult to convince people who work there that is to take the risk because of regulations, because they have to put their own, I would say, they are afraid. I experienced this myself. For so many years, I'm going, and they said, Olga, we would do it, but we are afraid to do it. Because what if it doesn't work? And then I will go to jail. So they prefer to say no, because it's safe. And I have it every time. And I'm starting to being pushy, because after 4 years, time is crucial here. They start to direct communication that we are afraid to say yes, but because what if it won't work? And China's strategy is something that I was trying to implement on this much smaller scale, because regarding this technology, what they did, okay, they wait until someone developed it, right? And we already have a small factory. We have a certificate. This is industrial process. The efficiency of these panels is the same as the silicon. It can be even higher. Many more things you can do with that. So once they already knew it, they
put a massive amount of money and build a huge factory. Doesn't matter, it's not working perfect, okay? But now, right now, even if they produce something and if it's still not working, they can upgrade the machines, they can learn how to do the mass production on the scale. And in my case, like in this, I would say, from my experience, is like 4 years ago, I said, look, I have the first factory. It's not perfect, but I know what I did right, what I did wrong. Now I need the big one. And I need it now. And we have to start to do it now because it's like 2 years to design the machine and build it at free. And within the 3 years, I will solve a lot of problems. And no. And I actually, then there is this kind of an attitude that, no, Olga, when you have to first solve the problems, and once you are ready and you are at the good efficiency, stability, whatever, then we can consider building. But then it's too late.
The investors ask you to have 100% waterproof business case, and then they are willing to come to you and invest, as I understand. So we know we lack the risk capital in Europe, and we know in mining that the investments that are happening are coming from Toronto and from Sydney, and South African companies are investing in mining in Europe. And so we have an issue there, and we need to discuss that with EIB, although everybody's running to EIB to de-risk their business case. Jacek, please come in.
The EIB, I mean, EIB business model is we have the AAA rating, and so, you know, this is our business model. Thanks to this, we can lend on good conditions, and engaging in risky projects undermines our AAA rating. So we are trying to push the EIB towards greater risk, but it's difficult. But, you know, just to respond to what Olga was saying, that, you know, there are governments, even in solar, where the business case is difficult in Europe, there are governments in Europe that are betting on that. If you take France, they are investing from public money hundreds of billions of euros into gigafactories making solar panels. So they support at the same time production, but also consumption. So they are obliging their procurers already now to apply local content requirements, to also in subsidy schemes to households when they install solar PV on their roofs. These have to match the local criteria. So governments have to have a more active role in this policy, otherwise it will not work.
But why is it done at government level and not at EC level? It's European.
Well, we are doing this with ENSIA now at EC level, but the French are front-loading what we will ask all member states to do.
Yes, maybe coming back to the material science and also the advanced materials technologies, like you Dorota, explained. Which applications do you see at risk and of necessary raw materials?
Okay, so as I already explained to you that you have piece of crystal in all your devices, practically all devices where we cannot have the raw materials for them will not exist. We cannot build them. But for example, looking at particle materials, and Rolf mentioned defense is very important before the panel, gallium antimonide. So if we don't have gallium, we cannot make good AR infrared detectors for drones, for example, which is now very important, and indium phosphide.
And gallium is where comes from what?
95% China.
But from what stream? Is it side product of zinc or where
this I have to ask for help.
No, I'm a simple economist too. So is there somebody who can answer the question where the gallium comes from? No. We only have lawyers and economists in the room.
Maybe from France then.
No.
It's zinc production. Okay, yeah.
Not only, but that's
okay, thank you.
The other 5% is, I think, Japan and Russia. So.
No, but we have zinc production. We have large zinc producers in Europe. I think we can satisfy more or less 30% of our needs in Europe from local zinc production. Why shouldn't they produce also gallium? But probably they don't have a business case because China is a very aggressive market player. As soon as a competitor comes into the market, they simply flood the market with gallium or whatever, and then the prices go down and the business case in Europe is dead again.
Okay, other interesting crystal is indium phosphide. So you know that we have the developing AI. We produce lots of data. Like in 2010, we recorded 2 zettabyte data, which is 10 to 21. And in 2023 it was 120, and in 2025 it's going to be around over 180, which means 100 more times than in 2010. And so we need data centers, and for the data centers, for the high-speed communication and for storing the data, we need indium phosphide, for example. And but not only the raw materials. As I mentioned, the problem is also in crystals. And I would like to give example of beta barium borate. It's an oxide crystal, not semiconductor, but it's a crystal used in all lasers. It's a nonlinear crystal, and it's made in Russia and in China. Nobody buys in Russia. Everybody now buys in China. So if China cuts it, all the laser industry, for example, especially all the tens of laser companies in Lithuania, they are gone. So it's, and I would like also to add to this what Jacek told, that actually for the advanced materials, also European Commission tries to do something. So European Commission started a technology council for advanced materials, and in last year in July. And in this council there is 7 big companies like Michelin, Airbus, I think Umicore, Safran, and some other 7 research institutions. In this we are. And 7 organizations and all the representatives of all the member states. And so the point is to discuss and decide about the materials, which materials we need now and which materials we need in the future.
Okay, before I let everybody on the panel have one wish for free towards Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, to facilitate or to help to overcome the challenges that we have, or your own challenges in your company. I will open the floor again for questions. Who wants? Quentin, I know you, and then the Mr. just behind.
Thank you. Quentin Dulce from the International Copper Association. Mr. Szydło, you described your situation quite well. And we know that Poland is the first supplier of copper concentrate to the EU. So it means KGHM is the major supplier of copper concentrate to the EU before Chile and Peru. And when you said that your question is how to survive, I think everyone should be very concerned. And the Commission should not just go to other countries to look at securing supply, but should also go to you to understand what are the key issues and challenges. And I would like to invite you to elaborate a bit on this, also knowing you have assets outside of the EU, so you can compare the situation there. And everyone should also know that you are a price taker. So what matters actually to your competitiveness is the costs of things like energy costs, labor costs, etc. So if you could elaborate on the key issues and solutions you may propose on this. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, maybe it was not the best word, survive. However, it is better to be very, I'm not shy to use these strong words. As KGHM, first of all, we do not sell concentrate. We are a full integrated chain, and we extract 400,000 tons of copper in copper ore, which means something like 380 in concentrate, but 100% of that concentrate is treated in our own copper smelters. Still not enough to fulfill smelting capacities. So we also use external sources of concentrate, which are the main criteria should be similar and applicable to our process. Why did I use the word survive? Because so far we extracted something like 20-something million tons of copper from our own deposits. And still, there is more than 20 to be extracted. But to do that, to assure that, we cannot wait for a long time, even short time. We have to take decisions. Because when every mine, irrespectively what kind of metal is extracted, has so-called life of mine. So the content of metal is decreasing with time until, let's say, the point where when simply it becomes not profitable because the content of nickel, copper, molybdenum, whatever, is so low that it's beyond profitability margin. To extract the remaining millions tons of copper, decisions to build necessary infrastructure, and we are very deep, should be taken as soon as possible. And this is what I was doing for the last year to assure the conditions that these decisions can be taken. This is what I meant. First, you're asking about our costs, the main problems that we have, like most of mining companies. Labor cost is not low in Europe, first. Energy cost, everyone knows here in this room. I have to mention something which is not solved yet, but I'm quite optimistic. In Europe, additionally to all the negative factors to that business, we have something more, which is the royalty or mining tax, which in Poland, for example, is the highest in the world. Can you believe? Highest in the world. We have deepest and most difficult mines in the world, and the mining tax is the highest in the world. Okay, we are very, very advanced, and it was already mentioned in the media that this formula is is outdated, and this tax will be modified. But this is the precondition to take the investment decisions. I can imagine the situation that this tax, okay, one can imagine, it will be increased even more. Then the decision is obvious. We will not reach remaining metal in Europe. No way. I'm not sure. I wouldn't like to elaborate on that, but it's not easy in Europe for raw materials. So it's good that we have Critical Raw Material Act, but there should be further next steps.
I think that this is the key message that we convey also as Euromines. The Critical Raw Materials Act is a good starting point, but there needs to be much more to make it actionable and a success. So we have a last question, if I'm allowed to give that, and then I need 30 seconds for each panelist. So 2.5 minutes, so you have 30 seconds for your questions, and the answer will be 1.5 minutes that you have.
Hi. Oh, here we go. Okay. My name is Brian Chesler. I'm from EDANA. It's the trade association that represents the nonwovens industry. Those are things like diapers, tampons, etc. My question is, actually, how do you, as I guess as a panel, how do you propose we can increase the appetite for risk in the EU, given that we know that this is one of the biggest barriers to scaling up, Olga, as you said. You said one of the problems that you're facing in upscaling is that nobody wants to invest. So how do you get people to part with their money?
Who wants to come in?
Well, I can take it maybe. I come from a world where we are very risk adverse. And there is a reason for that, because we depend mainly on institutional money. I mean, 70% of the space programs are public funds, and 30% is only commercial. So when you have taxpayer money paying your programs, you try not to take risk. And this is why we've got this approach. And this reflects as well in the amount of money that we are putting in the programs and that the Americans are putting. So the Americans put 5 times more in space programs. And they have done many more things than us, but in certain domains, we are more advanced than them. So we've got a lot of results, a lot of added value, but we are risk adverse. So we need to change that. In order to change that, you need to convince the person who funds. And so it needs to be clear that the money you put, you may not have a 100% return on investment. You may fail. And then you need to go to the next step to carry on, to learn the lessons from the failure and to carry on. But today, this is not the case in Europe. So we need to change the way we are funding the programs.
We have one more question from Margotza from Leviathan. For those who don't know, Leviathan is the Polish Confederation.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Małgorzata Mroczkowska-Horn, Polish Confederation Leviathan, the biggest Polish employers organization. There's been a lot said here about Critical Material Law Act. There was a mention of Critical Medicine Act also. We welcome both, and we understand this is a good framework for going forward. There was a lot about financing here and the need for strategy. My question to all of you really is, do you think that having taken those important steps already, is European Union prepared to actually take bold steps now in creating appropriate specified type of funding for various projects like perovskites, like deep mining, like creating pharmacy factories in our European Union territories? Is one question. And secondly, is the strategy currently in place envisaging these things sufficiently enough? Thank you.
Jacek, I think that's your question.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. I already used this 30 seconds to answer. Because that's actually, that was my wish, that if there was one thing that I would want is that we would be able to really impact member states and regions to do what we collectively commit to do. And power in Europe is very dispersed. And if you look at the track record of member states in applying EU legislation, it's actually very poor. So I think, coming to your question, we really need to try to follow our commitments. And that's partly linked to insufficient administrative capacity. So what we do, for example, in the EU, for the implementation of the Net Zero Industry Act, the Critical Raw Materials Act, we have earmarked 800 million to help member states implement those acts. And only 3 member states applied for that. So, I mean, I don't want to put the whole blame on member states, but we really have to improve the way we implement, not only the strategies, because to have a strategy is easy, the challenge is to implement it, of course. Yeah, that's always a good idea.
Yes, now we come to the 30-second wish list part. Olga, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Like, I wish that we have some good example, something like someone will actually, we will never know the answer for this question if we are ready or not, if we will not try. So I hope that I can manage to get the funding, I can try, and we really need a success story, because if we have one good example, the other will follow.
Stephane.
Yeah, I would say I think it's along the same lines. We need to remove the barriers. The barriers to implement, as you say, it goes with collaboration. So your collaboration between countries, but also collaboration between domains. Again, I think we are speaking a lot about the strategic interests of Europe at the moment, and we speak a lot about defense. Space is a component of defense. We need to have these two domains talking more to each other. Today, they are not talking sufficiently. And I think if we have, and maybe then having other domains as well, to increase the volume, the scale, and then maybe it will be easier to implement, because then you convince the persons who put the money in that there is a chance that it will succeed. So yeah, remove the barriers.
Thanks. Andrzej?
I already mentioned answering your question. The mining tax in Poland. My wishful thinking and my dream is that finally, within few months, we will find, together with the Ministry of Finance, with the support of the Ministry of State Assets, the modified, up-to-date formula that allows mining business, like copper mining, in Poland and in Europe, back on track.
Dorota.
Okay, the final one. So my wish is that we build industry for crystal growth in Europe. This is what the companies, European companies need, and the wish, which I will say now, also comes from some defense companies. They say, I need this crystal for Hawaii, but then I don't need it for 2 years. But then when I come back, I need it again, and I want it here. So there is this word which European Commission use, preparedness. So not only, what, for example, defense companies say, not only, it doesn't matter for us if this company will be profitable. We need to keep these materials. So we need this pot being hot all the time. So as a company and center which is financed in such a way that these materials are here in Europe.
I can reassure you that Europe is looking into different possibilities. There's this joint purchasing. We are going to have a meeting again with JOGMEC. The Japanese are very much more strategic on all of those aspects. So I thank you all for this interesting, diverse panel of different interests, different solutions, different challenges that have been discussed. I thank you from the audience for participating. And I think I can all invite you now to the cocktail, to the reception, and to continue the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.